Hey Optimancers, Chris here. I'm covering the Playtest 7 Sorcerer today, and no point wasting time, let's get into it. So, at level 1, the first thing we need to talk about is spellcasting, because far and away, this is the biggest change from the Playtest 5 Sorcerer. In Playtest 5, the Sorcerer got access to the Arcane spell list, which included Force Cage, Contingency, Simulacrum, Find Familiar, True Polymorph, and so on. The Sorcerer now uses the Sorcerer spell list from the 2014 Player's Handbook, which isn't a bad list, but it's not the Wizard list by any stretch. So it's actually hard to compare the playtest 7 and 5 Sorcerer in terms of straight power level, since this is such a huge factor. But if we compare this to the 2014 Sorcerer, the big news is the number of spells the Sorcerer gets. Although some subclasses alleviate this, the Sorcerer has had very few spells known all along. Basically, around 2 known spells per level of spell they can actually cast, and at higher levels, it's not even that much. So, with the Playtest 7 Sorcerer, we see a pumped up prepared spells column right from level 2 onwards, eventually capping at 22 spells compared to 15. It is much less painful to select spells for the Playtest Sorcerer compared to the Player's Handbook Sorcerer, I can tell you from experience in making builds. The low number of spells known for the 2014 Sorcerer is definitely a pain point unless you're playing an Aberrant Mind or Clockwork Soul Sorcerer. So granting some additional spells, I think, should be popular with players. I've playtested the Wild Magic Sorcerer a few times now at various levels, and I definitely notice the difference when I select my spells. And also at first level, we get Innate Sorcery. So in name, this feature existed at level 1 in Playtest 5, and it gave you the lackluster Sorcerer's Burst cantrip and an automatic preparation of the equally, maybe even more, lackluster Chaos Bolt spell. And that's it. I considered it a throwaway feature. Now you get a bonus action you can use twice per long rest. For the next minute, your Sorcerer's spell DC is improved by 1, and you have advantage on attack rolls of Sorcerer spells. My advice is to consider that bonus action when you are selecting your spells. Like, if your plan is to cast Animate Objects and then throw some cantrips on following turns while the objects continue attacking, you just aren't going to have the bonus action available for Innate Sorcery. But this is a good feature, especially if you're planning a big saving throw spell. That +1 to DC really makes a difference. It's like 2 extra points of charisma. An advantage on all attack rolls, that's going to come up too, even if you aren't concentrating on attack spells. Because, let's say you cast that slow spell on round 1, and you're probably throwing cantrips after that, so you'll feel that free advantage on top of the +1 DC. So this is a really nice feature. The 2 uses means you probably won't be using this all the time, so pick your battles. There is a feature to use it more often, though that comes up later. At level 2, we get Font of Magic, and there is one change I found from the Player's Handbook version. If you create spell slots, it's a bonus action, and it always has been. However, it also used to require a bonus action to convert spell slots into sorcery points. Now that requires no action by the sorcerer, and that's not an oversight, they've written it specifically. This sorcerer has more ways to spend sorcery points, so being able to recover them without the bonus action will be relevant. There's also a little hack that I'm going to show you later that definitely makes use of this feature. Meta Magic. So we saw all kinds of meta magic tweaks in Playtest 5, and it appears that all of them made them through to Playtest 7 with the exception of Twin Spell. Also, one meta magic that didn't get tweaked in Playtest 5 got a change. Seeking Spell is now 1 sorcery point, and it used to be 2 sorcery points, which was too expensive, so good change. Though, unless we see some higher stakes attack roll based spells, I still wouldn't recommend Seeking Spell, but I appreciate the reduced cost. In Playtest 5, Twin Spell allowed you to cast a spell of up to 5th level without expending a spell slot as long as you cast that same spell on your previous turn and spent a number of sorcery points equal to the spell's level. That's been replaced with this new Twin Spell, a complete redesign. When you cast a spell that has an upcast option where you target an additional creature when you cast a spell with a higher level spell slot, you can instead spend a sorcery point to increase the spell's effective level by 1. I've already done an analysis of the new twin spell in the video I'm linking up above, so if you want more details, check that out. And of course, another change from the 2014 Player's Handbook is we're going to select our Sorcerer subclass at level 3 when it's level 1, obviously, in the 2014 Player's Handbook. Okay, level 5. So, Sorceress Restoration replaces Sorceress Vitality from Playtest 5, and that feature gave the Sorcerer the Sorceress Vitality spell, which was a pretty lackluster healing spell, self-only. This feature gives us additional sorcery points equal to 1/5 of our sorcerer level, rounded down whenever we roll initiative or complete a short rest, but only if we're completely out of sorcery points. So we're talking 1 sorcery point from levels 5 through 9, 2 from levels 10 through 14, and 3 from levels 15 through 19, and finally 4 at level 20. Now, here's why we keep seeing these features where you need to be out of a resource in order to benefit from it. The design team wants to encourage players to use their resources, so they figure that if they have a feature like this, we will use all our sorcery points. However, I don't think this is good design because it's one thing to encourage us to use all our resources. I'm okay with that. It is another to expect us to blow them all right away. I want to be encouraged to use resources, but not deplete myself of resources so I can have one lousy sorcery point for the big fight. Now, it really sucks to have this big feature at level 5, and we're probably not going to use it. And it keeps scaling up, and I'm still not going to use it. It also sucks because the stated design goal was to have all classes benefiting from short rests beyond just expending hit dice. But unless I'm completely tapped out, my sorcerer isn't getting that short rest goodness that the fighter, warlock, druid, cleric, even the monk is getting. So I have worked out a hack that makes this feature work for me and should make it work for you by combining it with another revised feature on the playtest sorcerer, even as it is written here. So I want to share it with my audience as it will improve your experience if you are playtesting with this version of Sorceress Restoration. It's also going to encourage you to spend your sorcery points, which is their design goal. And this is also going to give you a way to enjoy short rests every time, whether you need to spend hit dice or not. So you start your day with your 5th level sorcerer. You have 5 sorcery points, 4 first level slots, 3 second level slots, and 2 third level slots. So what we do is we immediately use Font of Magic right at the start of the day to spend all 5 sorcery points to create a 3rd level slot. So now we have 3 3rd level slots. Now, that takes a bonus action, but it's outside of combat, so no problem. Now, if I wanted to, I could convert that spell slot back into sorcery points, but I'd only get 3 sorcery points. So I would be behind by 2 sorcery points. So I'm not going to do that, at least not yet. So then, I start my day and enter combat. Sorceress Restoration immediately provides me 1 sorcery point because I'm out. Now I'm only 1 sorcery point behind. During the combat, I spend the sorcery point for metamagic. If I happen to need more sorcery points in the fight, it's not a problem, because, as I covered before, they changed Font of Magic, so I can convert spell slots into sorcery points without an action, so I can do it at any time, any number of times, whenever I want, even if it's not my turn. That said, whether I do this or not, I'm still 1 sorcery point behind for the day. So after the combat, we enter another combat later on in the day. Again, I get a sorcery point. Now, I'm even. I'm not behind at all. I spend the sorcery point during the combat and convert more if needed, and now it's as if I never used Font of Magic in the first place. Basically, the slate is wiped clean. Now we're going to take a short rest. I get another sorcery point, and now I am ahead. I spend it on an extended spell or something, whatever. I am now golden. Every combat, every short rest, I come out more ahead, and Sorceress Restoration is working for me every single time. The longer the adventuring day, the more Sorceress Restoration wears out those endless sorcery points. So let's jump to level 10. Now what I do is I grab 1 5th level slot and 1 2nd level slot right out of the gate. So that's 7 levels of spells. Now I'm 3 sorcery points behind. But since I get 2 sorcery points every time I roll initiative or take a short rest, I only need 2 uses of the feature to come out ahead. And by the end of a day where maybe I had 4 encounters and 1 short rest, that's 7 extra sorcery points over and above what I started the day with. Also, since I'm getting 2 sorcery points after a short rest, I don't need to use those on meta magic before the next battle. I can convert them into a spell slot right away. 1 free first level slot after every short rest. So the fighter player wants a second short rest, or a third, or even a fourth to recover their action surge? No problem. I'm benefiting 2 every time. So what you want to do is immediately spend all your sorcery points on as few slots as possible. Because if you spend all 10 sorcery points on first level spell slots, that's only 5 levels in spell slots. So you get the big spell levels first, then spend any remaining on lower level slots until you are completely dry. You must be completely out. So if I'm 15th level, that's a 5th, 4th, and 1st level spell slot, 10 levels worth of spells, 3 recovered by Sorcerer's Restoration, and just 2 uses, and I am ahead. And by the end of the day, if it's a pretty standard adventuring day, I am way, way ahead. So, is this feature good? Yes, but it's unfortunate and unnecessary to require the player to use a hack like this to make the most of this feature. But if they stick with this design where you have to be out of a resource to benefit from your recovery feature, at least with the Sorcerer, we have a hack that can make it work, and work pretty well. And ultimately, I guess we are doing what they were trying to encourage. We're spending all our sorcery points, and more. What I don't like is you can't expect a newer player, or even a casual player, to figure out this hack. I mean, even a serious player. I've been playtesting the Sorcerer, and I didn't even think of this hack until analyzing the features for this video. So anyone who doesn't figure this out ends up at a disadvantage, and that's simply not ideal. Level 7, we're going to get Sorcery Incarnate. So the 2014 Sorcerer doesn't get a feature. I mean, they get regular scaling of spells and sorcery points at level 7. And the playtest 5 Sorcerer got Arcane Eruption, which was basically one more known spell, but it's at least a good spell. What Sorcery Incarnate does is it scales up your innate sorcery feature. It allows you to apply 2 metamagic options to the same spell while you're using innate sorcery, though you pay for both as normal. And in addition, if you run out of innate sorcery, you can spend 2 sorcery points and a bonus action to activate it an additional time. Now, if we're using my hack, you start combat out of sorcery points, but that's no problem. We get 1 sorcery point when we roll initiative, and when we use this feature, we can either burn a 2nd level spell slot, or a 1st level spell slot along with the one we gained at initiative. At level 10, we're going to have the 2 sorcery points after initiative to pay for this. Of course, we're also burning spell slots to fuel metamagic, so this might not always be worth the cost. You're just going to have to analyze your own situation. But this is a nice feature. And of course, for 2 combats per day, we will have innate sorcery without any sorcery points required, and applying 2 metamagics to a spell can be very good. Now at level 9, there is no feature, but I do want to mention that at level 9, the playtest 5 Sorcerer had the horrible version of Sorcery Incarnate, which was not like Sorcery Incarnate on this Sorcerer. It was a terrible 5th level spell that you learned that you were never going to want to cast. It was kind of like this version of Innate Sorcery plus Sorcerer Incarnate, but it cost a 5th level spell slot, it used your concentration, and so it just was not worth it. I mean, if I want to do 2 metamagics on a spell, it's probably a concentration spell. I don't want to be concentrating on a 5th level spell that I had to use to set this all up. It was terrible, and I just want to say how glad I am that they've made it into a base class feature that does not use concentration. Such a huge improvement. And speaking about the playtest 5 Sorcerer, so at level 15, we're going to get no feature with this Sorcerer, but our Sorcerer's Restoration does scale. And this is when the playtest 5 Sorcerer got Sorcerer's Restoration. It did a flat 4 sorcery points. So now we have a scaling feature. So we're getting it way, way earlier, and it'll eventually scale up to 4 sorcery points, which I think is much better. Again, I want to get rid of the whole you must be out of sorcery points because I think it's better for newer players. But for me, as a player who actually knows the hack, it's not a problem. I'll just use the hack. Level 18, we're going to get a subclass feature. And I just want to mention that the playtest 5 Sorcerer had Arcane Apotheosis at this level, which was the Broken Wish feature. So I am very glad to see that gone. But at level 20, we get Arcane Apotheosis. And when I saw the name, I was nervous. But this is not the same as the Playtest 5 version. Now it's the capstone. While your innate sorcery feature is active, you can use one metamagic option on each of your turns without spending sorcery points on it. The Player's Handbook gives 4 sorcery points with a short rest, and the Playtest 5 version gave an epic boon. And what a nice capstone this is. Since we can apply 2 metamagic options to a spell with innate sorcery, this means that metamagic isn't free completely, but nevertheless, this is really nice. And remember, you never have too many sorcery points to spend. I mean, my 20th level sorcerer is going to be completely out of sorcery points before the first combat. They'll just have more spell slots. They'll have 2 extra 5th level slots and an extra 4th level slot, which I could convert to 14 sorcery points at any time I need to, and then I get another 4 when I roll initiative. And if I don't use those, no problem, again, Font of Magic. And to complete the base sorcerer analysis, we should look at the sorcerer-specific spells. So, Arcane Eruption was the only sorcerer spell in Playtest 5 I thought was a good spell, and basically the only change here is switching the Constitution saving throw to Dexterity, which actually makes this even better. So, it's a 4th level spell, 1 action to cast, covers a 20-foot radius, and you do 66 damage of a type you choose from Acid, Cold, Fire, Lightning, Poison, Psychic, or Thunder. Half damage on a successful saving throw, but if they fail, they also gain a condition until the end of your next turn based on what you rolled on the damage dice. And you actually want to roll a 1 on one of those dice anyways, because incapacitated is a really awful condition to apply. Then when we upcast for more dice, it's not just more damage, it's also a better chance of incapacitation coming up. Imposing conditions to multiple creatures without concentration, it's just really nice. And if it ends up being incapacitated, even better. And it ends up being incapacitated a lot. And damage flexibility is nice as well. This is just a really solid 4th level spell that I have found to be very impactful. I have cast it many times in my playtests. And Sorcerer's Burst is the sorcerer-only cantrip. This one is a 120-foot range attack cantrip that, in Playtest 5, did a d6 damage with the same choice of damage type as Arcane Eruption, with a chance to roll an additional die if you rolled a 6, and potentially another if you rolled another 6, etc., to a limit of your spellcasting modifier. The problem with this cantrip was the d6 was just too low, even taking into account the possibility of extra dice. Now it's a d8, and this is now a fairly solid cantrip. It's not quite the damage of Firebolt, but it's getting close, and with the selection of damage types, and you can target objects with this one as well, I think this is a solid pick. So the Sorcerer overall, because of the reverted spell list, I am not sure this Sorcerer is more powerful than the Playtest 5 one, even before the Broken Wish thing, but it sure feels a whole lot better. If you're going to have spells that are just for the Sorcerer, and I think you should, then they should be spells you actually want to cast, and they've achieved that. There's also a unifying theme with the spells with the multiple damage type options and an additional randomized aspect to each of them. So they've done a good job there. Innate Sorcery and Sorcery Incarnate are both fun, and the capstone looks cool, but not broken. I haven't playtested that yet. I am actually quite happy with where the Sorcerer has landed here. My one sore spot is having Sorceress Restoration require we be out of sorcery points. But, I have my hack. I just shouldn't need a hack. New players will not know about the interaction and likely just won't benefit from the feature, and that's not ideal. So I hope they fix that. Otherwise, I'm pretty satisfied, and it's such an easy fix. Make it short rest only, but you don't need to be out of sorcery points to benefit. Now, we all make mistakes sometimes, usually small, but sometimes pretty big. The biggest mistake, though, would be to leave this video still not being subscribed. And thanks to the patrons of this channel, I'm able to do this full time. And wouldn't you rather me make a mistake calculating DPR than having me steer a cruise ship? If you would be willing to support this channel through Patreon, it would be very appreciated. Link is in the video description. As a thank you, you'll be able to watch videos like this one early and without YouTube ads. Let's move on to the Sorcerer subclasses. Draconic Sorcery. So, this is a Sorcerer classic, and a weak subclass in the 2014 Player's Handbook. I mean, especially compared to more recent Sorcerer subclasses. And the Playtest 5 version of this subclass was really iffy. So let's look at what they've done. Level 3, Draconic Resilience, is the same as Playtest 5. The difference from the Player's Handbook is the natural armor. So that one has armor class of 10 plus 3 plus dexterity. Now it's armor class 10 plus dexterity plus charisma, which I consider an improvement. I mean, your charisma should always be at least a plus 3, and since you're likely raising your charisma, your armor class will actually scale. Imagine that. Then Dragon Speech, so we got a change here from Playtest 5. So the 2014 Player's Handbook gives you the Draconic language and UW proficiency bonus to charisma checks when you're dealing with dragons. Playtest 5 said your speech was understood by all creatures of the dragon type, and you understood their communication. Now you gain the Draconic language, and your speech is understood by all creatures of the dragon type. So the language is gained, but the bit where you understood their communication has been removed. Now if there's any question why the change from just learning Draconic, not all dragon-type monsters speak Draconic. For example, a wyvern is a dragon type, but has no languages. I assume the understand their communication part was removed, as a number of dragon creatures understand Draconic, but don't speak any language, and there may have been some question as to whether you could communicate with them regardless. So this answers that question. I mean, this is all low-stakes stuff. This is polishing out a ribbon feature, but I think they're doing fine. And then level 6, we have Elemental Affinity, which is the same as Playtest 5. The difference from the Player's Handbook is the old Draconic Sorcerer had to spend sorcery points to get resistance to the damage type temporarily, which was ridiculous. Having it just be straight resistance is much better. I think they could even go further here. I'll get back to that later. First, let's talk about level 14, so Dragon Wings. So permanent Dragon Wings are back. Playtest 5 gave a bad feature here. The less said about it, the better. Compared to the Player's Handbook. So now you lose these wings if you're incapacitated. They can also now be spectral, and if they aren't impeded by anything you're wearing. I mean, this is fine. If you do become incapacitated and lose the wings, you can just bring them back with a bonus action, so that's not a big deal. Being able to make the wings spectral is just a bit of a convenience thing, like you have clothing or armor or something that can't accommodate physical wings. Well, now you have a workaround. That's fine. This isn't a huge change from the Player's Handbook. It's just a bit of polish, and yeah, it's fine. Then we have level 18 and Draconic Presence. Quite a bit of change here. Playtest 5 had no 18th level subclass feature, so I'm just comparing to the Player's Handbook. It's a bonus action instead of an action. It's no concentration instead of concentration, which was awful. But it is still lost if you're incapacitated, but I'll take no concentration and you lose it if you're incapacitated, no problem. Player's Handbook had the creature immune for 24 hours if they made their saving throw. That's gone. And with this feature, if the creature leaves the aura, they lose the condition. I'm still not sure this is a great feature, but it's at least an okay feature, and that's a huge improvement over the 2014 version. And this, in my opinion, is a much better job than Playtest 5 on this subclass. Features are tuned and polished, and little pain points of the old version are gone. The 18th level feature has been made at least worthwhile. This subclass, though, it's still on the weaker side, especially considering that Aberrant Mind and Clockwork Soul will be published alongside this, and you're going to see that Wild Magic got a big boost as well. So I think a little more buffing would be reasonable. And I hear a lot of people say that they should add some free spells, and that's definitely an option. What I'd like to see is give the Draconic Sorcerer the Transmute spell Metamagic for free. And when they use their Transmute spell to convert a damage type to the type they chose for their elemental affinity, it costs no sorcery points. That's what I'd recommend. In fact, I would just make that benefit a part of elemental affinity. Let's go on to Wild Magic Sorcery. Of all the subclasses that needed a rework, Wild Magic was near the top of that list. Wild Magic rarely triggered without DM approval. Bend Luck was too expensive to use. Spell Bombardment was just awful. This redesign is one of the ones I found the most exciting in this playtest. And I've been playtesting Wild Magic Sorcerers extensively at various levels over the past month and a bit. So, level 3, First, we have Wild Magic Surge. So this is mostly the same or similar to the 2014 version. Up to once per turn, when you cast a sorcerer spell with a spell slot, you roll a d20, and if you roll a 20, it surges with Wild Magic. If it creates a spell that requires concentration, you don't need to concentrate. You cannot apply metamagic to a spell created with a Wild Magic Surge. And with the 2014 Player's Handbook, it said the roll was only made if the DM called for it. Good riddance. 1 rather than a 20 triggered the surge as well. That's the only differences. So I applaud when the Mother May I mechanics of a feature are removed. So good. But here's the thing. You will almost never make the Wild Magic Surge roll anyways because of Tides of Chaos. So Tides of Chaos. The 2014 Player's Handbook version, you give yourself advantage on a test, so an attack roll, saving throw, or ability check. Once you do, you can't do so again until you complete a long rest. Anytime before you regain the use of the feature, the DM can choose to have you roll on the Wild Magic table after you cast a spell, a first level or higher, and then you regain the feature. So more Mother May I mechanics. But unlike Wild Magic Surge, this one has high stakes. If the DM always chooses to have you recover this feature, then Tides of Chaos is really powerful, granting you advantage just constantly on initiative, attack rolls, ability checks, and saving throws, and your magic is constantly surging with Wild Magic. Now, the constant advantage is great. The Wild Magic surges are not necessarily great, but the promise of that kind of gamble is kind of the draw of the subclass. Now, the Mother May I mechanic has simply been removed. If you use Tides of Chaos, then you cast a sorcerer spell with a spell slot, you regain Tides of Chaos automatically, and you roll on the Wild Magic table automatically. Now, personally, I'd love to see the player choose whether to recover the Tides of Chaos or not, but honestly, that's a nitpick. Overall, so here's how this is going to work in gameplay. The Wild Magic Sorcerer is using Tides of Chaos a lot. They get advantage a lot. And they roll Wild Magic a lot. As it should have been all along. It's a powerful yet dangerous ability. Now, if you figure that the random nature of Wild Magic Surges is something that you don't want on your character, then you probably aren't playing Wild Magic Sorcerers anyways, and there's nothing they could do to this subclass that keeps it thematic and makes it right for you. If it is something you do want, now the subclass actually does what it promises. Level 6, you get Bend Luck. Immediately after another creature you can see rolls a d20 for a test, you can use your reaction to roll a d4 and apply the result as a bonus or a penalty, your choice, for 1 sorcery point. And they've halved the cost of this. This used to require 2 sorcery points, and the thing is, it's a good feature. It just used to be too expensive. 1 sorcery point is right on target as far as I'm concerned. Then level 14, Control Chaos. This one is unchanged. When you roll on the Wild Magic table, roll twice and choose which one to use. Since you will be rolling on the table much, much more often than you used to, this is very nice. And then level 18, Wild Bombardment. So this was formerly called Spell Bombardment. This allowed you, when rolling damage for a spell, to choose one of the damage dice that rolled the maximum result, and then you could re-roll it and add it to the damage. So for example, you roll 40d6 on your Meteor Swarm. With 40 dice, you're going to roll multiple 6s, so now you get 41d6, changing your average damage from 140 to 143.5. So in other words, it's like not getting an 18th level feature at all, or a significant one anyways. Now when you cast a spell with a sorcerer spell slot, you create the effect of your choice from the Wild Magic Surge table, provided the effect casts a spell or restores all your expended sorcery points, but you can't do so again for 1d4 long rests. So obviously, right from that description, you know that restoring all your sorcery points is an option, and obviously potentially the best option. I'm here to tell you what the other options are. Keep in mind, none of these will require concentration. So you could choose, instead of recovering all your sorcery points, to cast Fireball centered on yourself, cast Magic Missile at 5th level, cast Confusion centered on yourself, cast Grease centered on yourself, cast Levitate on yourself, cast Fog Cloud centered on yourself, cast Polymorph on yourself to turn into a sheep, cast Mirror Image, cast Fly on a random creature within 60 feet. The sorcery points just sound a whole lot better than any of these options, though I guess keep in mind action economy. Like, if you're being attacked and you cast Shield, well, you could use this to apply mirror images for free, or levitate 20 feet up, or create a fog cloud. So there may be occasions to use some other options, but most of the time I would think you'd want to get the sorcery points back. And then I'm blowing any remaining after combat on Font of Magic, of course, because of Sorceress Restoration. So if it is not clear to you, I love this redesign. It took all my issues with the Wild Magic Sorcerer and it addressed every single one of them. In playtesting, this works as advertised and has given me a good experience every time. So for the Sorcerer, there is some stuff I would still change. I would change Sorceress Restoration. I think I've made that clear. I would give the Draconic Sorcerer something more. But overall, I don't think we need another version of the playtest Sorcerer. This is pretty good. Just tweak a couple things, and I think we're pretty much good to go, and a significant improvement over the 2014 class. Way more fun to play. Do you agree? Let's have that conversation in the comments below. Otherwise, until next time, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everybody, and I'll talk to you soon. Here are some folks who always steer well, like when they made their way to my Patreon page and became mage-level supporters. Hey, Mr. Wonderful, Babrak, Blue Wolf, Condor, John D, Descarpus9, El Conquistadorito, Falcon Neal, Jared Huberger, John Wayne, Joseph Hall, Joseph Robideau, Joseph Rogers, Wu Carl Kong, Lila Corpsegrave, Maddie, Michael Michelle, Moxie, Nemo, Paul Suzak, Prometheo NTG, Purge Thunder, Reichenstahl, Ryan Wilmot, Shane and Todd Beyond, Starfall, Earshine, Third, Valentin, and Wade. Thanks so much to all of you.